Breaking news out of Minnesota, where Fox News can now confirm the gunman accused of shooting two state lawmakers and their spouses has been arrested. 57-year-old Vance Boelter is accused of assassinating Democratic Minnesota State Representative Melissa Horton and her husband, and severely injuring State Senator John Hoffman and his wife. Hoffman and his wife underwent surgery, and the lawmakers' homes were less than 10 miles apart. Investigators say early yesterday morning, Boelter, dressed like a police officer, came out of Hortman's home and fired at police before escaping. We're also learning police found a list of 70 names, including other lawmakers and abortion providers, in Boelter's car. That car also allegedly looked like a police car. Minnesota's Governor Tim Walz is calling the shooting a, quote, act of targeted violence. And President Trump is promising persecution to the fullest extent of the law. The FBI was offering a $50,000 reward for information leading to Boelter's arrest. Joining us now on the phone is former D.C. police detective and defense attorney, as well as a Fox News contributor, Ted Williams. Ted, we're just getting this information in the last 5 minutes or so. I want your take on what we're learning.
Well, what so far from what we know here, and this is all fluid at this time, but that there was a location where they found the automobile, and they found what they believe was Boelter's cowboy hat, the cowboy hat that's in many of the pictures that he was seen wearing. And as a result of that, law enforcement made a concentration on that part of Minnesota. And it is my understanding, and from what we've been told, there have here been an arrest. I'm somewhat surprised because I thought that with all that we know about Boelter, and we know quite a bit now about him, that he very much was going to resist and probably go out with suicide by cop. But apparently that did not materialize. All indications are that he's under arrest. That's good. That's good for the citizens there in Minnesota, and clearly tells me that there was excellent law enforcement work. We also know that there was a $50,000 reward that had been put out by the FBI, and we know that at certain times, from the time that he was alleged to have shot the two, Hoffman, and killed the Horstmans, that he's been on the run and that he had some contact with individuals. So I think what you're going to find here, and we should have, I'm sure, a press conference very soon.
Yeah, there's an 11:30.
What is taking place.
Yeah, we're expecting a news conference around 11:30, so in 45 minutes or so. So we should get more information then. Go ahead, Ted.
Well, again, as I said, and I'm very excited behind this because I was hoping that he could, if anything, be brought in without anybody being further injured, and specifically law enforcement officers that were pursuing him. And so as a result of good law enforcement work and possibly some help from citizens in the area, this man is now in custody where he certainly belongs.
You know, talk to me about the amount of time. It didn't seem like it took long, but the amount of time that it took the authorities to capture this man. And not only that, but that has to be incredibly dangerous for him to be dressed as a police officer and for them to kind of go about that in a safe manner.
Well, it is, but from what we know, and at one stage there, he was, when he was alleged to have committed these offenses, he was dressed as a law enforcement officer. But we saw other pictures later of him dressed in other civilian clothes and wearing a cowboy hat. And so those were the last actual photos that we had of Boelter in some portions of Minnesota there. But then there was a press conference late this afternoon here where Minnesota authorities let it be known that they had found a car that they believe was associated with Boelter, and they also found a cowboy hat in the vicinity of where the car was located. So law enforcement then decided that they would concentrate on that area. And as a result of that, there has now been an arrest.
So Fox News alert: a man accused of assassinating a Minnesota state lawmaker and seriously hurting a second will appear in court today after a massive two-day manhunt. Former Assistant FBI Director Chris Swecker joins us now to react. Mr. Assistant Director, thanks so much for joining the program. Chris, I want you to get into the process, because I know you've been on the prosecution side as well. Initially, they do these base charges, and then as they present the evidence, it will probably escalate, right?
Yes, this is what we call a placeholder. Minnesota, they charge him with second-degree murder, as you know, and attempted second-degree murder. They will upgrade that. They need premeditation. They have it. They have pretty good evidence of it, but they're not going out on a limb, and there's no need to at this stage in the proceedings. There may also be federal charges as well, so rest assured that they're going to throw everything they can at this guy. And this will, I can't imagine him trying to go through some political show trial, but we'll see what happens.
Chris, there's also the other element when it comes to the motive, because not only do the people want to know, but you need to show that in court. You're dealing with someone with a lot of different affiliations, religious affiliations. He was appointed by Democrats, but also some people say that he had right-wing tendencies as well. It's a muddy mess there. So what is BAU going to look at, the behavior analysis unit, to kind of figure out his thinking?
Yeah, he reminds me a little bit of Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber, whose ideology was kind of all over the political map. He had sort of his individualized, customized, hardcore ideology. But they will look at his manifesto. I believe that there was some writings in his car, his abandoned SUV, the hit list. They'll look at all his any postings he might have had on social media, any expressions of his rhetoric or his ideology to friends and family or associates. He seemed to get around quite a bit. He posted on social media. He was kind of across 2 or 3 different professions, one of which was security, but then he was in the food service industry and he'd been overseas a little bit. So they'll study up on him. The investigators will get a good, clear picture of him. They probably do pretty much right now. But as we said, the placeholder, they just want to be sure what his motive was.
That's right. Chris, do you worry with all the political attacks, all the protests around the country, that guys like him have the opportunity to ride under the radar? Because, I mean, it goes back to a resource issue as well. You don't have enough cops to look at everyone.
That's absolutely true. This is your worst nightmare as a law enforcement officer, because there's so much heated political rhetoric out there, much of it by so-called leaders who inflame people like this, who are on both ends of the political spectrum. Make no mistake about it. They're on both ends of the political spectrum. And this heated rhetoric, and this, even Tim Walz is one of the worst offenders, referring to ICE agents as Gestapo, modern-day Gestapo. He put a target on their backs, and he also fans the flames of the riots that are going on across the country. So that physician needs to heal himself, and maybe set the tone here. But it is law enforcement. Is frustrated right now because of this, and it's going to spur a whole an enhancement of the security industry, and which I do a good deal of consulting. Mm-hmm. Whenever this happens, you'll see a furious move on the part of people who are in charge of these sort of things to step up security.
It's so true. I was just talking to one of my buddies who's a Secret Service agent. He says he spends most of his day doing 6 to 7 stops at people's houses, telling them to just knock it off online. They make a threat against the president. They say they didn't mean it, and then he ends up saying, just knock it off. You just can't do it. You're committing a crime. So the threat level is definitely high, Chris. I'm sure you know all about it. Thank you, sir.
A 57-year-old Vance Boelter, suspected of assassinating one Minnesota lawmaker and nearly killing another, was found overnight by police. He is said to have willingly turned himself over to officers after being found in a field.
Boelter exploited the trust our uniforms are meant to represent. That betrayal is deeply disturbing to those of us who wear the badge with honor and responsibility.
When this sort of evil is in one of our communities, that law enforcement comes together to put all of their resources together to make sure that that person is taken into custody.
Former federal prosecutor and Holtzman Vogel partner Jonathan Fahey joins me now. Jonathan, your reaction to this suspect's arrest?
Well, it's great news that he was arrested. I just saw it this morning, and it really does show probably strong coordination with both, state, federal, local law enforcement, and they did a great job catching this guy. But I think on that earlier clip you're showing, he really is, when they say the face of evil, there's nothing better to describe what this person did other than just pure evil, to go to someone's home, kill them, just for not that there would ever be a justification, but to just show up at their door, murder them in cold blood, just truly horrific, not only for them, but the entire community around them. So great news that he was caught. Great work by law enforcement there.
Yeah, and the suspected motive is that he was targeting people who support abortion rights. He does have an online presence, and it shows that he was a devout Catholic, a pastor who preached at a church in the Congo. And one of his Facebook posts said he sought out militant Islamists in order to share the gospel and tell them that violence wasn't the answer. You just called him the face of evil. How do you go from devout Catholic to committing these crimes, wearing this mask that we see on our screen, and killing 2 people and attempting to kill 2 others?
Yeah, it's really kind of scary because it does appear that maybe just something snapped with this guy, because at least if you see that, it doesn't look like this would be the person that would be later killing people or have intent to murder people in his head. But certainly something may have happened that changed this guy, but it is just hard to tell. And maybe they'll find that out as they dig deeper into it, not only social media, but they're going to do extensive interviews with family, friends, neighbors, other people that know him. So there may get some more insight onto that, but it is very troubling to see that.
Yeah, and then one of the other major elements of this case, Jonathan, is that he didn't impersonate a police officer. And that's something that you can't undo, you can't unsee. Are you concerned about copycats when it comes to this, and how does law enforcement mitigate that?
Yeah, I would be concerned about copycat people doing this. Also, the other thing is it sort of erodes trust in law enforcement. Not that law enforcement didn't do a phenomenal job here, but now if people encounter law enforcement, particularly in that area, they may be hesitant to either cooperate with them and things like that. And you have so many instances now of these swatting instances where people call 911 on unsuspecting homeowners and police come, and you do think there's more potential violence because of this. And I think the way you overcome it is just probably time, and people, again, build trust. And again, the police did everything great in this case, so hopefully it doesn't lead to more instances. But yeah, I would certainly be concerned of copycat cases. And just as a point, this is a unique case in a lot of respects, but impersonating police officers to commit crime, it has happened before. I actually prosecuted a murder case where people got into homes impersonating police to gain entry in the home and killed people within it. So it's not unheard of, but it's certainly a very troubling situation.
A 2-day manhunt, and now the suspect is behind bars, facing 40 years for each count. Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us.
The shooting of 2 Minnesota lawmakers over the weekend putting the focus on a disturbing trend, the growing threat of political violence against public officials. Tragically, this is nothing new. 8 years ago, a gunman opened fire during a practice session for the annual congressional baseball game. Republican Congressman Roger Williams survived that attack, and he joins us now. Sir, it's good to have you with us. I noticed this chart here. The rise in congressional threats from 2017 from 3,900, almost 4,000, to 2024, almost 10,000. And do you feel the difference over that time?
Well, there's no question we do. I mean, it's harder to go places without having people harass you, yell things, even challenge your family. I've had situations in my family where my daughters have gotten some unbelievable hate mail. We've been in church where people have decided they need to speak out and threaten pastors and threaten elected officials and even the president in churches. So it's a serious situation. I think the Capitol Police realize it, and I think they're working on a program that would begin to have some protection for elected officials, especially when we're in our district.
Senator Eric Schmidt talked about Capitol security yesterday on Fox News.
The Capitol is a very, very secure place, and I'm sure it'll depend on sort of the threat matrix that exists. Politics is a substitute for violence in many ways, right? We can't have one creep over into the other. You can't have violence replace the kind of vigorous debate and elections that you have to resolve these differences and move the country in a particular direction.
In your last answer, you talked about the security when you're home in your district, and I know that that has been a concern from members for a while. You had the violence over the weekend. Of course, that was state representatives there in Minnesota. But do you have a solution, an idea for how that could work for more security when you're back home or on the road?
Well, I just think we need people involved with us that can basically protect us and protect the people that are around us. I'm not a security expert, but I know I feel comfortable when we have people with us that could alleviate a problem if it existed. And I think the more they see of this, what would happen in Minnesota and the baseball game, that people try to copy things, and I think that's a real concern.
Congressman, please take care. Thank you for joining us. A busy news day here, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Breaking right now, the suspect in the chilling Minnesota shootings over the weekend is about to appear in federal court. We're watching for that. We'll obviously take you there live as soon as it gets underway. 57-year-old Vance Boelter also facing state charges. Investigators say he wore a mask and a fake police uniform when he showed up at the homes of at least 4 lawmakers. He is accused of killing former Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband. Her husband's name is Mark. And then he wounded Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife Yvette. The sheriff calling it an unthinkable act of violence.
Vance Boelter inflicted unimaginable harm to our community Saturday morning, and he did it while impersonating the very people who are trusted to protect and serve.
It is no exaggeration to say that his crimes are the stuff of nightmares. Boelter stalked his victims like prey. He went to their homes, held them out as a police officer, and shot them in cold blood.
Correspondent Brooke Taylor on this all weekend long and joining us now from Minnesota. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Martha. Yeah, we are also learning from the acting U.S. attorney here in Minnesota that Vance Boelter went to the homes of 2 other politicians here. One of them wasn't home, and at the other home, there was a dispatcher there, so their lives certainly saved there. Prosecutors say he had this list, names of all the politicians, information about them and their families, and the prosecutors say they believe he had every intention of just going down that hit list. So officials say this carefully planned attack that started on Saturday morning when Boelter, disguised as a police officer in a face mask and a police uniform, knocked on Senator John Hoffman's home and said a shooting had been reported. Investigators say that Boelter hit him multiple times and shot him and his wife. Miraculously, both of them survived. Their daughter was also home at the time. She called 911. Now, this violent streak, it ended at the home of State Representative Melissa Hortman. Police believe that they arrived at the home to check on Hortman, but when officers spotted Boelter, they say he opened fire. He rushed into the home, killing the state lawmaker and her husband before escaping out the back. Now, investigators say that forced him to ditch his car, really just ruining his plan and likely saving more lives. Inside of that SUV, they found weapons and a hit list with the names of 45 Minnesota state and federal elected officials.
It is no exaggeration to say that his crimes are the stuff of nightmares. Boelter stalked his victims like prey. He went to their homes, held them out as a police officer, and shot them in cold blood.
And he appeared in federal court here a few minutes ago on a laundry list of charges, including murder and also stalking. He also faces state charges. Right now, he's charged with second-degree murder and attempted murder. But the county attorney says right now they just wanted to get that warrant out, and they're going to upgrade those charges to first-degree murder. Martha.
Brooke, thank you very much in St. Paul, Minnesota.
A race online to pin Boelter's political motivations on your opposing party's beliefs. The details are sketchy. It's hard to make sense of his background. And it may be the least important things we try to figure out what this crazy person has done in Minnesota. But one thing is true. We have seen a growing list of political violence just over the past 6 months. We've had the murder of United Healthcare CEO. We've had 2 Israeli embassy staffers shot and killed. We've had Tesla dealerships firebombed, Jewish demonstrators firebombed in Colorado, and people in Los Angeles burning flags to protest ICE. And just this weekend, the left ramping up its rhetoric in cities coast to coast with the No Kings protest. That brings me to today's Big Three. As part of this No Kings protest, you would have seen, perhaps, if you were somewhere around North Carolina, a North Carolina state representative who ended up posting this photo on Facebook. It's State Rep Julie Von Hafen, and the caption reads, "In these difficult times, cuts may be necessary." But what you see in the photo are dolls of Donald Trump's head beheaded. Obvious reference to cuts. She has since taken down the post and condemned political violence, but not for apologizing. She has not apologized for that post. Single isolated incident, right? Okay. How about this also from No Kings weekend? This is a 70-something-year-old man approaching a booth, paying 5 cents for anxiety therapy to beat a doll of Donald Trump. This is a piñata of Donald Trump that people were doing. There's also what I described as well. You could get a little doll, like a little voodoo doll, and bang it on a stool. Get your anger and hatred out of Donald Trump. Where did they get this idea? Where did all of this license to enact at least faux, and in some cases, as we've seen, real political violence? I wonder. Watch.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country, and maybe there will be.
If you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd.
I said if we were in high school, I'd take you behind the gym and beat the hell out of them.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
All right, to help us dive into rhetoric and actions of the left is Laura Trump. She's the host of My View with Laura Trump. Laura, thanks so much for being with us. You know, I think we have to separate this from what just happened in Minnesota because we don't know yet the details of who this man was, what motivated him. There's a lot of indications in a lot of different directions that make you raise your eyebrows. But what we do know is the left has been engaging in increasingly strong and violent rhetoric that has now had that invitation accepted on several occasions, including, for what it's worth, 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life.
Yeah, Will, that's terrifying. I mean, thank God those were not successful because it would have changed our entire country and, quite frankly, the entire world had that happened. But you're right. Look, all those clips you just played, I think we're sadly familiar with them. And people have kind of gotten used to hearing this from the Democrats. I mean, the reality is when you don't actually have a message and you don't actually have a policy to sell the American people, how do you keep your base engaged? How do you reach out to these people? How do you keep them, you know, kind of paying attention to what you're doing? I guess this is the strategy, Will. It's entice people down this path of violent rhetoric. And, you know, don't forget, we just had James Comey, the former FBI director, posting his little thing online, 8647. This just leads people to believe that if you have a problem, I guess the only solution is violence. From Maxine Waters, you create a crowd, you get up in their face, you push back on them. All of these different incidents are not isolated. One of them would be enough. But the fact is that we have leaders, some of these people like Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat Party, who continue down this path. We have normalized this sort of behavior. And so when you see over the weekend that you have folks shooting, you know, commercial grade fireworks at LAPD officers, pushing on horses, those sorts of scenes, they have become sadly commonplace in this country. But I can tell you, it is always wrong. We should always be condemning this. We should never be condoning it. Unfortunately, it seems like the condemnation typically comes from the right and the condoning typically comes from the left. unfortunately.
It's getting increasingly common, to your point. It's just getting more and more common. And you can see these people, this No King protest, losing their minds. It's not a mentally healthy and well population that we're watching in the streets. All right, Lara Trump, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.